Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Everything in my own head feels muffled because of this headset.
Well, that's how we're starting the episode, clearly.
Yes.
So, this is episode, oh my goodness, 13? Lucky 13?
13.
Of the Wordy Pair. Pretty sure. 14, actually. It's 14, because this is why you don't say episode numbers in your podcast. Lesson to be learned. Let me just triple check there.
We look at things sometimes.
I forgot to check episode 13 of the Wordy Pair. And I am Rudy.
And I'm Justin, and this is episode umpteen aught.
Umpteen aught. No, it's 13. I checked. I just didn't think to check before we started recording. No. Okay, so let's not go through all that nonsense. But today,
No. The nonsense is good. We're doing the nonsense.
We're doing the nonsense.
I'm just kidding. We're talking about aliens.
Yeah, well, Alien and Aliens.
Yes.
2 great movies, but great for very different reasons.
There's a lot of funny things that happen in the world of movie sequels.
Of course.
And one of my favorite ones is everything that happened with the 80s action movies. Well, I guess technically Alien was what, 1979?
Alien was 1979, yeah.
Yeah, but there was just this whole thing that happened. It's like some weird James Cameron effect where a movie would come out, like Ridley Scott does Alien, and then they get James Cameron to direct the second movie, and it's still a good movie, but it's a totally different type of movie. Like, they're both technically science fiction.
Yes,
but in
one
the
is
first...
a slasher, and the other one is an action movie.
Yes. The first movie, you have all these people that... You get a bit of the hard sci-fi at the beginning with them traveling through space, and they get interrupted from their return home to go check out an SOS signal, or what they think is an SOS.
Yeah, they have no idea what it is until it's too late.
Yeah, and so in their investigation, you get a good probably 40 minutes, maybe half hour, 40 minutes of the movie is just things happening in space with them coming across this mystery. It's
nearly an hour. So I actually took some notes, and the point where they lift off of the planet, and the phrase "engage artificial gravity" comes in at about 51 minutes in. So
okay, so yeah, and it's a very atmospheric movie. Like, that's
absolutely
a large selling point of watching this movie, is that you get this atmosphere of people being, they're by themselves in space investigating something, and the movie does a great job.
And no one can hear them scream.
Yes, nobody can hear them scream. They often hear each other scream, but nobody hears them scream.
No. So, yeah.
But then the second movie comes along.
Yeah.
And it goes from that, and the second movie still had a lot of that good atmosphere, and it really helped that they continued to use this was still at the time when they were using, actual props and sets. Mm-hmm. And they took the atmosphere of the first movie, but then they sort of gave it this action-y edge where they've got, the music is louder, they've got, like, military march music is very prominent. So. You have a team of Marines that's going to go in on a rescue mission. They learn pretty quickly that something's gone wrong on a colony that happens to have landed and tried to terraform the planet where the original alien was found.
Right.
And after a while, there's a lot of it turns into this very like high tension, not Japanese goblin, but a high tension alien
Yes.
that where you have all these people that are surrounded by an army of aliens at this time, which is much worse than just having to deal with one. And yet somehow the first one is the scarier movie because it's like these people alone with the one alien. Whereas this one is more like, oh, well, how are they going to handle this situation? And, it's kind of got the thrills of, trying to escape from a danger, but it's not like the scary type of thrills that you get from a horror movie, if you want to call them scary,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of incoming violence in the second movie, and there's a lot of waiting for violence to happen in the first movie.
Yeah. The gunfire takes place almost as soon as they make contact with the aliens. You're hearing gunfire, and aliens are dying, people are dying. There's
that's another thing, is that the alien in the first movie is basically invulnerable, partly because of the equipment that they have, but still relatively invulnerable. And in the second movie, the aliens are not invulnerable, but they turn into a vulnerable but endless horde, basically.
Yeah, and the first movie, I don't think that... Well, the first movie took care to point out that, they can't really do anything that would rupture the alien because of its acid blood. And they're on a spaceship, and they pretty early on in the movie, or at least pretty early on after they discovered the facehugger alien, they showed that the acid blood was actually a danger to the ship. They're all running around like, oh my god, it's going to eat through the hull. And it's just like this one droplet of blood that's spattered onto a floor. And it's, it eats through 3 layers of floor.
Yep. Before it finally neutralizes, yeah.
Yeah, so they know that they can't really do anything to let the alien bleed. They can't just put a bullet in it. So it's probably not that the alien's invulnerable in that movie.
Well, they have flamethrower. They have a couple of flamethrowers and stuff like that. And they never get used in the way that you would hope that they would get used.
Yeah, you don't actually see them have any success against the alien with their weaponry. They all kind of they kind of have they have the trouble of having to send each person individually against this alien because the others have other jobs that they need to do to make sure that one person doesn't die.
Right.
And of course there's okay, so having seen the train wreck that was Alien Covenant, it's interesting to note that in the first Alien movie, there were actually reasons where one person would go after the alien as opposed to all of them.
Well, let's break one of these down, right? So, okay, the first time. Well, I mean, do we want to go in this far immediately, or do we want to kind of start from the beginning?
Let's get through just this one point.
Okay.
So
the first time they're trying to deal with the alien, they think that they're dealing with the thing that burst out of one of the characters' chests. It's a little snake-sized thing, maybe a couple of feet long and pretty small and thin. They think they're aiming for that. So they split their team of 6 people into 2 groups. One group is not part of the scene where this happens, but the other group consists of, let's see, it's Brett and Parker and Ripley working together. They have a motion sensor that allows them to determine whether there's motion of an object nearby. They go looking for the alien. They end up in a kind of a dimly lit locker room. The motion sensor goes off. There's a locker that's closed, so they have a net and they have a cattle prod. And the plan is to cattle prod the thing and grab it in the net. So they open the locker, and inside what is there is not the alien, but actually a cat. And we haven't seen the cat so far this movie, I'm pretty sure at this point.
No, the cat appeared earlier in the movie.
Did the cat appear earlier? Okay.
Yeah, so they established that there was a cat.
I don't know how the cat got locked inside a locker, but it did. And the cat runs off. Brett doesn't catch the cat in the net because he's like, it's a cat. We don't need to catch the cat. But what he doesn't realize is that they're just going to pick up the cat again when they go looking again. So basically the reason they split up now is because they they think they're looking for a thing that's small and, isn't super dangerous. And so they split up. They tell Brett to go look for the cat. Brett finds the cat, but Brett also finds the alien. And it turns out the alien has grown significantly in the last couple of hours.
Just a bit.
Pretty significantly. And it doesn't go well for Brett, is what we'll say.
It's great how they did that scene, that whole scene where they find the cat in the locker and it dashes off because they actually have it in the net, and then Brett lifts the net up and they start yelling at him like, "Why'd you let it go?" And he says it was the cat, and he's thinking everything's fine, but like in a little bit of clever writing there, one of the other characters is like, "Well, now we might pick it up on the tracker again. We could have put it somewhere where we wouldn't." And it's just a little touch like that where it's just like everyone's thinking differently in the situation. You don't just get the idea that these are mindless drones going about their job. They all have personality.
Well, it's not just that, but like it also gives them a reason to A, get a little bit angry at Brett. B, tell him to go get the cat because, he's the one that let it go. He's the one that wasn't thinking through all of the consequences of the issue. And so they're like, well, you go get it. We'll keep looking around here.
And it's a very logical progression of how things end up, it's very logical how things go.
Right.
So they separate. Brett finds the alien, or rather the alien finds Brett, and...
Right.
Wait, Parker. Is that Parker?
Parker's the black guy.
I've got all the names mixed up.
And you said you watched this movie twice.
I did watch the movie. No, actually, when you said Parker earlier, I was like, wait a minute, wasn't Parker the woman? Who was the woman? I don't remember her name at all.
Oh, not Ripley. No, not Ripley. The other one, Lambert.
Lambert. Okay, I thought she was Parker for some reason.
So there's a thing going on here that's very interesting that I thought was worth mentioning is that even though they're like a civilian outfit, they all address each other only by their last names. And there's a couple interesting writing points about that I think are worth kind of like going over real quick. Like, it's very easy to have a bunch of 1- and 2-syllable grunts for character names if you're using first names, because people will often have like a nickname that they go by. Like, my full name is Rudolph, but I usually go by Rudy. Your name is Justin. That's 2 syllables. That's pretty easy. But these names are not really, first names are generally not very complicated. They're made of a very limited number of sounds. And so they all kind of would roll together. And they would also be... another thing that I remember reading about is that intentionally they made most of the characters... In the original script, they made them... It didn't matter whether they were male or female. Right? So one of the things that using surnames does is it gives you a larger range of names to use. And it allows you to have names that are a little bit more complicated and a little bit more, what would you call it? Like, little bit more like unique. Like,
it certainly helps your casting choices.
It's not Jack, John, Mike, and Bill and Ann. It's it's Parker and Lambert and Ripley, and these are all very different sounding names. And they're all about 2 syllables, 1 or 2 syllables still, but they're a little bit more complicated than most first names are. It also provides a little bit of distance between the characters, which means that they don't fully trust each other either. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and they end up with this with this situation where they're initially, that actually early on there's a scene where Ripley is technically in charge of the ship since the captain is not on the ship.
Right.
And one of the crew members, the science officer, goes directly against one of her orders with the justification that he was following the ship captain's orders, who was technically not in charge at the time.
Right.
And that's how the alien gets on the ship. They bring someone on that's infected. It's a really interesting way to handle, how each person ends up in the situation they're in, because the whole time you're watching this movie, you don't actually know what anyone's motivations are. And you learn a couple of very small things early on that kind of set the tone for the rest of the movie, such as, Ripley's adherence to the rules that she thinks are pretty important in the situation.
Yeah.
Ash's compliance with the captain, and a lot of what Ash does early in the movie is interesting to go back and see after the first time you've seen the movie.
Yes, of course.
And then the Dallas, the ship captain, who kind of just has this, I just want to get the job done. Let's get home. And, he knows he's a very competent captain, but at the same time, he's not necessarily following all the rules. And he justifies this by, in the situation in which they bring the alien on board, he doesn't want to leave someone outside to die while going through a quarantine procedure.
Right. So
it's interesting in the following scenes where you don't have a lot of what would happen in in a modern movie. If something like that goes wrong, you would get a lot of scenes of like Ripley and the captain going back and forth about who was right and who was wrong and being angry at each other and maybe mistrusting each other. But that doesn't happen in this movie. Ripley is perfectly fine after the fact. She's not happy that,
Well, that's not quite right. She confronts Ash. Right?
She confronts Ash, but between her and the captain, there's no enmity.
She's no she's in the same for the same reason that she heeds the rules early on. She heeds the rules later on. Once the captain is back on, it's his ship again.
Yeah.
So there's. I mean, what I'll say is that there's a lot that's done without words in this movie. There's a lot of character interactions that are quite subtle. I mean, we even get a hint that Ripley is kind of that everybody on the crew sees Ripley as kind of a hard ass early on when she tries to go to talk to Parker and Brett while they're doing some work in the bowels of the ship, and they don't like her. They think she's going to kind of bother them, and so they play a couple of tricks on her, stuff like that.
They give her a little bit of a hard time, but in a friendly, joking manner. Just
kind of, sort of. I mean, they do that thing where they have the gas escaping so that she can't be heard.
Yeah,
which is what I mean, there's a lot going on there. I mean, there's something to be said about the amount of work that's done in this movie without words necessarily. Like, we don't even have any words at all until about 6.5 minutes into the movie.
Which is, that whole opening to the movie is just fantastic. It's probably my favorite science fiction movie opening. There's
a pan shot with a title screen and a couple of credits, and that takes a couple of minutes. There's some very good, very interesting music that goes on over that kind of gives you at first it's very kind of calm classical strings kind of stuff. But then when the word alien finally shows up on screen, there's a swell in the music, tension, and kind of like a screaming quality to the music at that point.
Yeah, good old-fashioned title sting.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of minutes of just pan shots, very slow pan shots of the interior of the ship before we even see any of the characters. Finally, we see a human face at about 5.5 minutes in. And they don't even say anything for a minute. We get a long shot on, I believe it's Kane's face, as he just starts to wake up from the cold sleep that they're in.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar in the second movie where I don't remember exactly at what point they show Ripley pretty early on in the freezer.
Yeah, I mean the second movie goes about 5 minutes without a word.
Yeah, most of the opening to that is a machine cutting a hole in the door to Ripley's ship that she escaped on in the first movie.
Right.
And after that, there's a brief moment of this robotic arm reaching inside the machine and scanning around to see what's in it. And then a bunch of guys in protective suits come onto the ship and they find Ripley, and then the movie kind of picks up from there back on. They weren't on Earth, they were on a satellite, right?
They were. That was a deep salvage team. So the people that found her were a deep salvage team. They brought her back to a station that was somewhere, in a relatively civilized part of space.
Yeah, they weren't actually on a planet. They were on some kind of satellite surrounding a planet.
Yeah, a space station.
Yeah. And, the beginning of that movie, if you've seen the first movie, you have a sense already that they do a good job of making you feel like they're picking up right from where the last movie left off. You learn a couple of things
kind of,
about...
sort of.
Kind of, sort of. I mean, you
They're starting. Well, I mean, yeah. So there's a very big time jump between the two movies, which is interesting. It does a few things for the story. Did you watch the theatrical release or did you watch the director's cut?
I watched both.
Oh, you watched both of Aliens?
Yes.
Okay. So.
Oh yeah, I guess I did watch them both twice, didn't I?
I don't know. I mean, you said you watched Alien twice, but that's fine. But I don't have a director's copy cut of the first one. If there is a director's cut of the first one, is there?
Yeah, there is. And the only difference I really noted in it was the scene where Ripley first goes to the the medical bay.
Mm-hmm.
Lambert actually kind of assaults her and starts calling her names for leaving them locked out for a moment, but it's like for 2 or 3 seconds, and then Parker pulls her back. And
is that was that actually part of the director's cut, or was it a deleted scene? That because I have my DVD has a deleted scenes portion where I think some of those scenes are in there, but
it was in the director's cut. I don't know what else was in the director's cut that was not in the original.
Because I know both cuts of Aliens pretty well, but I don't know the director's cut of Alien, so I don't know what's in that one.
Yeah, so I think that's the only thing I really noticed. If there was anything else, then it must have been so small that I didn't even catch it. I watched the director's cut first, though, so I might have just been filling in when I watched the original.
Possibly.
There wasn't too much of a difference. I don't... You know what? No, I only did watch Aliens once this week to prepare for this, so I'm pretty sure... Yeah, I watched the director's cut.
Of Aliens.
Yeah, the long version.
Okay.
So I actually have no idea what was in it that was not in the original.
I know so we can go through that. I know the theatrical version of Aliens very well, so I know what's been added, and we can talk about some of the things that were added and what they do and what they don't do.
So the original, so the director's cut, I know it had that scene at the beginning, all the scenes at the beginning where Ripley was like in her hotel room and they were talking to her about what had happened, and they kind of...
No, that's all in the theatrical cut.
Okay, yeah.
The scene that's missing from the theatrical cut is the scene where she learns that her daughter is dead. Okay,
yeah. So that's like the one thing that was like a really big reveal from the first and second movie. I didn't know I didn't know that was only in the director's cut, though.
Yeah, that scene where Burke tells her, "Oh yeah, your daughter," because basically Ripley gets on this escape. She escapes from the what's it called?
Well, no, wait
Nostromo.
a minute. Wait a minute. Did in the original theatrical release did they show all of that footage with the mom and the dad on the planet going into the spaceship?
No, that's also in the director's cut only.
Yeah, because I didn't remember that from the original.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of there's a lot bigger differences than in Alien.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, so when Ripley escapes in Alien, she gets into this little shuttle and she goes into cryogenic sleep. In Aliens, they find her after she's been drifting for 57 years. So her daughter, in the director's cut of Aliens, you find out that her daughter died of old age before Ripley was even found. One of the things that does is it helps to motivate Ripley's character and her interactions with Newt later on. That's not in the theatrical cut. And that's one of the things that I think probably should have stayed in the theatrical cut.
Yeah, because I remember watching the original.
Yeah.
And thinking to myself, well, there seemed like something was missing between them finding Newt and, everything that they were doing to help get that girl out of there. It wasn't much, but finding out that she had that her daughter had died, and now she finds this girl on this on this colony that is in danger, and she's going to try and rescue her. It gives her makes a bit more sense for her motivations for doing so.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so Newt is about the same age that Ripley's daughter was when Ripley was in the movie Alien, right? So in the cut scene in the director's cut of Aliens, Ripley says, I was going to be back. I promised her I'd be back for her 11th birthday. So Newt's about that kind of same age range. So yeah, there's probably there's a lot in the theatrical cut. Ripley just takes Newt under her wing. In the director's cut, it's more clear that there's like a I lost my daughter thing going on. that's not present in the theatrical cut.
It's actually kind of funny. In the second movie, she's, they talk her into going back to the planet to investigate this alien problem.
Oh, so this is a great series of scenes, actually,
and
right?
Well, I'm thinking more in terms of a joke.
Sure, go ahead.
She's got Jones the cat from the first movie is with her in her apartment in the second movie, and
Yes.
She tells the cat that you're gonna have to stay behind, so behave or whatever. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I like to think that they going into the third movie they should have set it up the same, where she's like got Newt there, but Newt she's got like a cat dish on the floor and she just can't process that this is a human being. Everyone's just a cat to Ripley. And so she's just like, you can't come along this time, I'm going to die by alien. It's interesting that both movies kind of start the same way, with the introduction, with like the slow start to even get to characters, and then when you do, you get brief introductions, or you learn a bit more about Ripley in the case of the second movie.
Yeah.
You get that scene of her looking at the old files of her crew that had died on her ship.
Well, so she's not looking at those so basically,
unless that was in the director's cut. Now I'm confused.
No, in the theatrical cut, the hearing happens. She's not looking at those files. The other people in the room are looking at those files because they're trying to understand her account of her actions on the Nostromo, right? So when they pick her up, all they know is that she blew up the Nostromo and ran off in a shuttle. And so they're trying to figure out why she did that. And they're trying to, and of course the Nostromo was a very expensive ship. And so the question is whether Ripley has, any responsibility for that loss, right?
Right.
So she's at a hearing, she has a deposition, then she goes to a hearing with a bunch of executives, basically, and she's trying to convince them that this alien is a real thing, and they're very, very skeptical of her. And she doesn't know why they're skeptical of her. She's, trying to make her points, and they're like, no, there's no indigenous life on this planet. Blah 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 blah. There's no evidence inside the ship that there was ever this alien there. And she's like, yeah, I blew it out of the airlock.
Then there's one of the greatest moments in all of the Alien movies happens at that point, when they're just like, well, I mean, we know there's not, because we have colonies there terraforming the planet, and she's just like, what?
So that's the surprise. That happens after the hearing is over. Right?
Yeah,
the hearing ends, and they're like, okay, we're not charging you with any criminal charges at this point. We're not going to try to get the value of the ship back from you in any way, but we're going to suspend your warrant officer license, and you'll have to figure out another way to make a living. Sucks to be you. But basically, in desperation at the very end, as everyone's walking out of the room, she goes up to the one executive, Van Leeuwen, and says, why don't you just go check out the planet? You'll find the ship. And he says, well, we don't have to. There have been people there for 20 years, and they never complained. And she's like, and that's the surprise, is that people went 20 years on this little planet, terraforming it, without ever finding the ship. And so that is kind of one of the surprises, like, oh, they went 20 years and they never found it. It's one of those things where it's a little bit unlikely by today's standards. You'd assume that they would have a bunch of satellites in orbit and they'd be surveying from space and they would have found it, but
but the way the movie is set up, and the fact that it was made in the 1970s,
80s. Aliens was in the 80s.
Yeah, well, the fact that it was in the 1980s, and the fact that you're looking at it from that technological standpoint, it makes sense. Like the way the movie is set up, you're looking at.
Well, I mean, it even makes sense if you look at it more closely, because of the atmosphere and atmospheric conditions of LV-426 are not conducive to viewing it from space. It's a very stormy planet. The visibility is always garbage. That kind of stuff.
and that's consistent through the first and second movie. When they descend onto the planet in the first movie, it's through a lot of heavy cloud cover.
Right.
But James Cameron picks it up and follows up Ridley Scott's movie with this much more like 1980s action flick style of movie, instead of the subtle science fiction storytelling of the first movie. But
Right.
it still is a very well-told story in that regard. You get to meet a lot of new characters, and a lot
Well,
of them
so
are these
yeah,
Marines that have the kind of like there was definitely a mindset to what Space Marines would be like to people in the 1980s, where just this
sure.
brash and ragtag group that usually has like one competent leader, and the rest of them are, a lot of them are jokesters, some of them are serious, some of them are just there to get the job done and go, and they're all, they're all really good. Basically, like they're a group or a family that is, trained to go in and take care of these problems and get it done together and get out of there. And you can see that, like, when people start dying, they get pretty upset about it, and they get very upset at the people that caused it to happen.
Right. Well, there's an interesting point there about leadership, because you have this is it's kind of a trope at this point, but you have the officer who's very inexperienced and the sergeant under the officer who's very effective. And so there's an issue with the command structure that's used very well in the movie, because you have a very inexperienced officer trying to give orders. You have the sergeant trying to relay those orders to the rest of the feet on the ground, but the sergeant is also there with them, and so he's vulnerable. And we all know that one of the first people to go down in the first alien fight in Aliens is the sergeant, and that completely destroys the chain of command, because now you have an inexperienced guy who's trying to provide orders to people who no longer have, a leader around them that they trust. They have this guy who, has had 2 combat drops, including this one, and no one really trusts him. So he has to redeem himself later. But yeah, there's that whole chain of command thing with the bad officer but the good sergeant is a pretty common trope at this point. But it was very well done in Aliens.
Yeah, and there's also that little bit of background leadership from, oh geez, what was his name? The Wayland Yutani guy.
Burke.
Burke, yeah. Burke is. It's almost like he's the one like giving orders once they land.
So he's trying to, right? Like he's the company guy.
Yeah, he's the company guy that's kind of they're probably funding this expedition because they have a vested interest in the colony.
Right. Well, I mean, like,
I don't know if that was ever established, but
they're not in charge, but like he's an important advisor kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he believes he has some authority, but technically he doesn't. But it's kind of like a courtesy authority, where they kind of listen to him when things are good, but when things go bad, they don't listen to him anymore, especially when they find good reasons not to.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of character interaction in Aliens that doesn't happen in Aliens so much. Like
between Bishop and Ripley and...
Between Bishop and Ripley, between Apone and Hudson, between Drake and Vasquez, between Gorman and Vasquez. There's a lot of character pairings where there's something going on in Aliens. And there's less of that in Alien, but it's not, that doesn't make Alien bad. It just means that there's a little bit less focus on character, because it's a slasher movie.
It's a different type of storytelling. I mean, they fleshed out the characters in Alien pretty well for what they needed them for. And one of the things I really liked about it was when you go back and watch it again, the first time you watched it, you might not have noticed all the different times that a lot of the early storytelling for Ash was in facial expressions.
Sure.
Like when he stops Ripley from going out to let the others know that the signal might have been a warning.
Right.
But he gives a good reason. He says by the time you get there, they'll know if it's a warning or not. And then it's almost like he has this worried expression on his face, but you don't really know why he has a worried expression.
Mm-hmm.
And later in the movie, you have the scene, the famous scene where the alien pops out of the guy's chest.
Yeah.
Where there's this long moment where the science officer, who is probably the best medically trained person on the ship, I mean, very likely that he is.
Yes.
He is kind of sitting back and watching, like everyone else is jumping up and trying to help this guy, and he's just sort of watching for a moment, and he doesn't take any action until it gets to the point where he's going into a seizure, and then he gets up like it's an emergency. up until that point, it's almost like he's observing this. And until you know his motivations in the movie,
Yeah.
that doesn't really, that might not come off as odd at first. It might just be, oh, well, he's just like, what's going on here? Is something wrong? But then when you learn later on that he is actually there for a specific reason, it's like, oh, he was observing what was happening, and he was almost like he was interested in knowing what was about to happen.
Well, he doesn't do much either. In fact, one of them is about to like try to stab the alien with a fork, and he's like, "No, don't touch it," and he lets it. He basically stops the guy from forking it and lets it get away.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on there.
And it's hard to tell what his motivation for that is, because we've already established by that time that the aliens probably have acid for their blood, just like the facehugger thing.
Right.
So
that's a reasonable assumption. But like at the same time, you would expect the other crew members not to think that either. But maybe the science officer would. Yeah.
So he, whether done on purpose or because he legitimately thought that was what should be done. Yeah. There's no way for the other characters to really, figure out his motivation in that moment. And it's one of them things where it's like, I think I missed all of that until I went back and watched it a second time. Then I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Ash is in, it's interesting because there's the trope of the cowardly science officer, right? And that's not what Ash is. Ash doesn't ever like there's been stories and shows and movies where like the scientist is the cowardly guy, and something happens that he doesn't expect, and he freaks out and he freezes up or something like that, right? And so it would be one thing if Ash freaked out at this thing this thing bursting out of Kane's chest, or this alien growing from, something 2 feet long and probably 10 pounds to something 7 feet tall and 300 pounds in, a couple of hours, right? Like, you would think that if he were being effective, it would be because of that kind of shock, but it's not. It's clearly not. He's always very calm, and he's always looking around at things in a very kind of detached way. That could be, there's a lot going on there, I would say.
Well, I mean, we don't have to hide the fact that he's a robot for spoilers.
No, we don't. I know.
It's from 1979.
We're spoiling both movies if people haven't figured that out yet. 38 minutes in. But, I mean, so there's a lot going on there, too, because, like, how did the company know that there was that signal there? If they knew that there was a signal there, wouldn't another ship have stopped already, kind of thing? There's a few things going on there.
It's really it's kind of weird that the company seems to have. I don't know if the way that the movie presented it was that the company knew there was some kind of organic life there or not. It's not very clear.
It's not clear. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that go toward the they knew hypothesis, and that's number one, that they replaced the science officer with Ash 2 days before they left on this particular mission. Number two, that Mother has these special orders for what to do in case of an alien, infestation. There's definitely a few things that go in favor of the company knowing what was out there. But like at the same time, it seems like there's also some points that could go the other way. Like that thing in their contract that they have to check out possible signals of alien life is something that you might expect in a contract, like especially in a world where there isn't any intelligent life outside of humans, as far as you can tell. Like, there aren't any sentient aliens in the universe of Alien and Aliens. It's a very lonely universe, and so you could almost believe that the company would be like, hey, if you find something that you think might actually be an alien that might have sentience and making a signal, you got to go check it out. I mean, we got to know, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not necessarily harmful. But the fact that the first alien that they find that is, moderately intelligent is this, horrible killing machine is also, is something that you wouldn't expect necessarily.
Well, if we just take the first movie on its face, the most likely scenario seems to be that, just the fact that they replaced the science officer, I kind of lean towards the idea that
that's a big hint. Yeah.
So they don't necessarily know what's there, but they found a signal, and so their plan is to reroute this ship close to this signal on its return trip, so that they can have these people investigate. And then once they realize that there's organic life on the spaceship that they find, that's when the orders come in from Mother to preserve the organism at the cost of even the crew.
Yeah.
Like the timing for it is just either they knew ahead of time and this was always the plan, or this is a plan that was made on the fly. And it seems like it's a plan that was made on the fly because there's no indication anywhere that anyone else was aware of what was actually on that ship.
Well, right. There's a. I mean, if there was a secret dude on Earth who was like, "Oh yeah, we know that there's a alien here, and it's going to be this great bioweapon." If there's, it's entirely possible that information would have, gone, would have vanished in the 57 years between movies, right? Like,
yeah,
like that would be something that, Executive A would never tell anybody, and he would burn that piece of paper, kind of thing. Once the ship didn't come back.
Well, I mean, okay, so we're 43 minutes in though. Let's talk about some of the writing and like compare and contrast some things in like not just the first two movies, but I was kind of hinting earlier at this idea that when Dallas has to go into the ducts by himself to fish out this alien.
Yeah.
There was a good reason for it. Obviously, only one person can really maneuver around inside these ducts. They have the evidence from Parker's witnessing of it that the creature crawled into the ventilation shafts, and so they formulate this plan where they're going to try and drive it to the airlock and jettison it. So Dallas is in there alone. He's got the team backing him up, telling him, where they see the alien coming from using the device that Ash cooked up. He's got a flamethrower. He's going to try and use the flamethrower to prod the alien into the place they want it. They're sealing up the vents behind him as he goes so the alien can't double back on him in any way.
Right.
And this is a very logical reason why he ends up in a shaft with a killer alien that rips him to pieces, or actually doesn't rip him to pieces, because we find out later on that he was taken to some sort of nest on the ship that doesn't get much explanation in the first movie, but they elaborate on in the second.
Well, the nest thing is interesting because that's a famous deleted scene, right? The scene where Ripley finds the nest, because
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's it's famous because it suggests a very different life cycle from what you see in Aliens.
Yeah.
Right? So in Aliens, you have a fairly you have a slightly strange but not too crazy kind of insect lifestyle with a couple of extra steps, right? You have an egg. From the egg comes a facehugger. The facehugger grabs a person. The person then then an alien comes out of the person, and one of those aliens is a queen in Aliens, right? In Alien, there is no queen. There's just the one alien, and we know that it's just a regular alien because we see it, and we see the queen in Aliens, and we see that they're different. But that deleted scene in Alien, what it does is it suggests that the alien by itself has some kind of way to turn people into eggs, which is what's happening to the body of Brett and the nearly dead body of Dallas when Ripley finds it in that deleted scene. So there's actually a bit of, I guess, controversy about this change to the life cycle. That instead that Scott and Ridley Scott and H.R. Giger had this interesting idea where there was some kind of way that aliens converted people into the eggs, but that all got thrown away for Aliens for something a little bit more relatable.
I didn't actually know that because I know that later movies and books kind of establish that the way it works is there's a queen alien and the other aliens are like these drones that bring people to the nest so that the eggs can open up and infect them.
Right.
But that original idea actually sounds pretty interesting too.
And it definitely it's a very interesting idea.
It fits like the horror movie style.
Well,
just a little bit better.
the alien style system where the victims of the alien get turned into more eggs has a greater body horror aspect to it compared to you just get put into a cocoon and there's an other thing laying the eggs. Having you be converted into the eggs yourself is a much more, Lovecraftian H.R. Giger body horror thing going on.
Yeah. And it's nice that the movie takes the time to give you all these reasons for the characters to basically end up by themselves in a lot of situations. Because
in Alien, the crew is very small, right? It's 7 people.
Yeah.
Then Kane dies. That leaves 6 people. So they split into 2 groups of 3, which makes some sense. But then one person gets killed. So you end up with 5 people. Then you have the Dallas in the ducks scene, where you have 2 people tracking the alien in Dallas. You have 2 people stationed at the airlocks to open and close the doors as necessary, and you have Dallas himself inside the ducts. And as they get picked off one by one, their options get narrower as well.
Yeah, and even towards the end, when it's just 3 of them left, you have, Ripley has one thing that she's responsible for, and the other 2 are working together to do something they're responsible for, and they have to.
Oh, that's an interesting. Yeah, well, that's interesting too, because assuming you don't know how the movie ends, right? The first time you've seen it, the assumption is that the one person who goes off on their own is the one who dies, and they fiddle with your expectations there by having the alien attack both Parker and Lambert. And that's funny because Parker's actually armed, right? But the alien attacks Lambert in such a way that Parker is unable to shoot the alien with the flamethrower without killing Lambert.
Yeah.
And then basically Parker tries to attack the alien, and he gets killed first, and then Lambert is too vulnerable, and she gets killed next. It's actually a neat little shift because, up until now, it's always been the person alone who's been caught and killed by the alien. And so they flip it. They flip the formula for you for the 3rd time.
Yeah, and it's refreshing to go back and watch it, because the last Alien movie that I watched was, of course, Alien Covenant. And
sad face.
Yeah, this was a movie where everyone just chose to walk off by themselves to get killed by the alien.
Yeah, well, I mean,
For
there's
no
the famous
reason.
there's that famously bad scene in Covenant where the one guy is like, where the android is like, hey dude, hey, look in this egg, and the guy's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's not even the dumbest one, I would argue. Like people had just died, and one character is like, all right, well, I'm going to go wander off and find running water somewhere so I can bathe naked with unarmed.
Yeah.
And it's just so stupid, because I think shortly after that, someone else is like, hey, they've been gone a while, I'll go investigate.
By myself.
And it's just like the worst horror movie tropes in a movie that...
Well, so that's the thing that's worth maybe talking about, is that Alien has a very horror movie aspect to it. It is a slasher movie, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's very well done, so that you could believe it as a serious science fiction movie, or a serious, I mean, even a bit of a character drama in some places. Whereas a lot of those aspects get forgotten so easily in a slasher movie for the purposes of like, oh, well, we got to get to the next, gore scene. We got to get to the next gag. And there are some really good gore scenes and some really good gags in Alien, but they still manage to develop and have characters interact with each other and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about really good horror movie endings, there's not that much that's better than Alien. I mean, I can't think of one off the top of my head that's better than someone being trapped on a tiny escape vessel, realizing that the thing they thought they escaped from was on the ship with them, and just that whole scene where she's slowly sliding into her spacesuit, and she has to sneak out into the room where the alien is still sleeping, and buckle herself into a chair, so that she can hope she has enough time to depressurize the inside of the ship. And
right.
It's just everything about that final scene is just like, after all that happened, she still has to go through that. It was such a great ending. It was like there weren't too many better ways that you could have ended that kind of movie, and all the way up until the end had that suspense.
Well, so there's also something really cool there just in the set design. Like, I was looking at it as I was watching it, and the alien's head is kind of cylindrical, like a curved tube, right?
Yeah.
And where the alien is tucked itself in, there's a ton of curved tubes that are the same color and similar in shape to the alien's head. And so, it's very carefully designed to look like it's just a bunch more tubes, but one of those tubes is the alien head. And so it's very well done. It's all done practically, so it's very nice in the movie. It was one of the things that I noticed on this watch particularly.
Yeah, and it's so well hidden that at one point Ripley is inches away from it before it like shifts in its sleep and scares the bejesus out of her.
Well, it sticks a hand out, but yeah.
It's just like she was inches away from death, and it's just like you can see the panic in her eyes when she's just like she turns around and runs off and hides in the room with all the suits.
It's interesting that shuttle doesn't have enough. There's a few technical aspects of the Alien movies that bug me a little bit, like how there's not enough cryopods in the shuttle for the crew. It's kind of like a Titanic situation. There's their quarantine policy doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Like, they're supposed to quarantine people who are exposed to something for 24 hours, but there's no actual place to quarantine them. Like it's just like, oh, leave them outside. Well, I mean, if you have a quarantine policy that says, people can't get onto the main ship for 24 hours, then what you need is an airlock that leads into like a small medical facility or something like that. There's a lot going on technically that is like, wait a minute, that's a little funky, but you don't really notice it. Maybe
Weyland-Yutani just didn't want to pay out for that.
I mean, maybe, but
I mean, there's definitely nothing hidden in the movie about Weyland-Yutani being kind of a gross company.
Well,
it's interesting because
yes
like a lot of the company on its face is taking care of everyone, and like they even take care of Ripley when she returns, and she's kind of thrown to the dogs in terms of her career.
Yeah.
But especially in the second movie, when Burt comes to her and offers her this work, it's kind of like under. Things,
well, I mean, it's a deal, right? Like they're trying to make a deal.
Yeah.
They're trying to give her a way to redeem herself, basically. And I mean, I can see that working out. I mean, like, the thing is that the later movies made Weyland-Yutani out to be this really awful, evil, Vault Tech kind of monstrous company. But in the first two movies, there's not really a whole lot of that. It's very reasonable for people to be skeptical of Ripley's story after 57 years, especially with 20 years of colonists on the planet. It's, all of the negative things that happen, and you get more of this in the director's cut a little bit. But, everything bad that happens is directly based on Burke's actions. This one person. And, he never says, I've got orders from higher up in Aliens. He's like, no, I'm doing this so that I can get freaking paid, right?
Well, it's not just that. Like, when I say that you get the sense that it's this scummy company, it's kind of like, given the actions of a few actors in the first and second movie, you get this idea that there's this rot at the core somewhere where things are being... I don't know about that. I mean, like, if you just watch the first two movies and you don't like, and let's say you aren't sure whether Ash was put there because they knew that they needed that particular alien and they knew what they were getting into, right? If Ash wasn't a plant for that specific reason, like, he might have been a plant because, we're pushing you through a new area where there might be transmissions, places that people haven't been to, kind of thing, right? We're putting you through that area, and so, there might be something there, so we're putting Ash on there to, study it if we find anything. But, like, in the first movie, they're arguing about, who gets shares and who doesn't get shares of pay after they come back, and, it's like, they're negotiating. In the second movie, all the bad stuff that happens is due to Burke's actions, right? I mean, it's the later movies that really give you that sense that, oh, this guy at the center of the company, this Weyland guy is the bad guy, and, like,
that doesn't really happen in the first two movies so much.
I don't know. I think I can give a little pushback on that. I mean, the thing that really cements it for me is knowing that upon discovering this organism, the computer that they were sent with, Mother, is instantly, switches over to this plan of, well, everything about the organism is more important than the crew itself. And someone designed that system. So that gives you kind of a sense that there's
maybe, I mean, there's a bit of an Asimov thing going on there too, though, right? Like, in the first movie, the android is the bad guy and the computer is the bad guy, and it's one of those things where like the computer makes a decision, because we know that the computer's not getting transmissions from Earth, right? If it could, then all this information would have been sent, and that would have all it would have all made it. So like. There's there's the Asimov's laws of robotics, right? And those laws are not implemented in Alien. And one of the things that they claim they've done right by the time that Aliens starts is that they claim that they've gotten those rules right? So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it could have just been the computer making an impartial decision and saying, the discovery of semi-intelligent life on a separate planet is way more important than any 9 or any 7 people.
Well, don't
that
forget,
doesn't necessarily mean
there's also the fact that the science officer was given special access that Ripley found out later.
The science officer would. I mean, that's normal. Like they mentioned that Ash has access to Mother a couple of times in the movie, so it's reasonable that he has his own chunk of the computer that he works with. That order that shows up, it's not clear whether that order came from Mother itself making some kind of a value judgment, or whether it came from the company. If you assume that it came from the company, then yeah. But if you assume that it came from Mother making a somewhat, a cold but justifiable value judgment based on the fact that there is no other intelligent life anywhere else in the universe as far as they know, I don't know. It's.
I mean, it's up in the air either way.
I think that part of what makes it good is that ambiguity, though, right?
Yeah. Like, yeah, definitely. Because you don't know who you can. You don't know when you're watching the movies, like, well, or at least based on the universe that they created. They could have made 5 more movies where you never really knew who you could trust and who you couldn't, just based off of whether they worked for the company or not.
There could be good and bad people working for Weyland-Yutani. Like,
I mean, it seems obvious that the people in the boardroom don't have any particularly, evil intentions.
Right. Well, there's even in one of the cutscenes in the director's cut of Aliens, right? There's the guy who phones in. He's like, "We think we found something, but we want to make sure that we have the claim to it, and that it doesn't like go up to you." And the guy's like, "Look, I don't care. If you found something, as far as I'm concerned, it is yours." That guy's not a bad guy. He's not, but like, one of the things that the later quote unquote sequels did is they made that company into a much more, like a much more caricature type existence of the evil company with the evil CEO and the blah, 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 blah. And that stuff, it was way less obvious in the first 2 movies.
Yeah, I actually don't remember what Weyland-Yutani did in the 3rd and 4th movies, other than resurrect Ripley for weird reasons.
Well, so the resurrection of Ripley to get the aliens' DNA and all that stuff is just more bioweapon stuff, right? Like,
yeah,
But
like I don't actually remember like what the storyline was with the company in those movies, so I don't remember if they were.
The company doesn't do anything really in the 3rd movie except send a person who claims to be the guy that created Bishop to talk to Ripley. And like that's again ambiguous, right? He could be an android who's pretending to be the guy who created Bishop. He could be the guy who created Bishop, but he's under orders to get the Queen out of Ripley. There's a lot going on there. There's not a lot going on in Alien 3 with regard to the company, because it all happens on this remote and isolated prison planet.
Yeah.
So.
My God, what a ride it was! It was like I watched Alien 3 and I was just like, wow. I mean, that I guess it can't get worse than this. I'll go watch the 4th one. And then I watched the 4th one and I'm just like, wow.
I guess it can't get worse than this.
And then Alien Covenant happened, and I was like, well, that technically isn't a movie, so. It's very weird though, because like if you look at it from the start of Prometheus going into Alien Covenant, and then the first and second movie happen, it's actually a really, really, really rotten company that becomes a much better company.
Well, I mean, they go to a fairly. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the Wayland guy is the bad guy in
Prometheus.
What's it called? Prometheus. Yeah. Like they're not subtle. Like the first two movies are subtle. The rest of them are not.
Yeah, but that's like 25 years after the first movie and doesn't count.
That's not an excuse.
I mean, Prometheus, like a lot of people didn't like that one. I thought it was okay to sit down and watch Prometheus.
I mean, Prometheus was okay except for a couple of really stupid characters and a couple of really stupid actions.
Yeah, and but then like Alien Covenant, there's no excuse for that.
Oh yeah, Covenant was just awful. I mean, it was just a bad movie. It wasn't even a movie.
It's like what happened between that movie and the first Alien movie where everyone became competent?
I don't know.
It's really strange. It's really strange that someone would blow themselves up because they were so afraid of something they had seen. Like accidentally too. Like not even like a suicide thing, but just like you run screaming from an alien and your reaction you should know how a ship works if you're on a ship to some degree.
Yeah.
You should know what will blow it up for a start. Like that's a really big one, I think. I think anyone on that ship should know what they can and cannot fire off in a ship in order to keep it from exploding. But that is where the first and second Alien movies really shine, because the later movies were just people puking out things that you remembered from Alien to try and get you to come see another Alien movie. And the worst part about it is that Alien Covenant is easily the worst of all of them. And didn't Ridley Scott produce that one or direct it?
I think he directed it.
He directed it? Oh my God.
I think
like
so.
I could understand if he produced it, and like the only thing I wouldn't have gotten there was why did you not tell them to remove your name from it? But if he directed it, it's just like, what happened, man?
I mean, it's one of those things where
cell phones,
directed by Ridley Scott.
Yeah, cell phones have made it way too easy for people to phone things in, I think.
Something like that. I don't know. I mean, he must have been on set, but there aren't any sets in Alien Covenant, right? Like it's all green screen.
Yeah, it's all garbage.
And
green screen.
And but one of the things I really wanted to make note of is the set design in Alien and Aliens. Both of them have amazing set design. Like first off, you can never ever ever forget what the interior of the Nostromo looks like. You just never will. You know, once you've seen that movie, you're like, that's what the inside of the Nostromo looks like. And they, there was that game. What was it? Alien Isolation.
Yeah.
Where they reproduced it in a game, and it's like, it's an automatic plus 25 points to atmosphere of them, faithfully reproducing the elements of the original Alien spaceship, right? But like we're talking about like detailed, complicated walls on hallways. We're talking light and the ability to like for the flashing lights and whooshing gas jets and stuff like that. We've got the meeting room where they all like eat and talk and stuff like that. We have the room where Mother, where the room to talk to Mother, and the hallway leading into that, right? Like all of that is all very distinctive and very detailed and very good. But then you have Aliens, and you have these long hallways with all kinds of battle damage. You have some really amazing set designs in Aliens too, and it's all it's all there.
Those first scenes where they first enter the colony after everything's been destroyed and the Marines are moving in, those are all wonderful set pieces.
Yeah, it's amazing. And they use it, throughout the rest of the movie, and to a very good effect. Whereas it was a bunch of people sitting in a green room for the rest of the movies, or not Alien 3, but like Alien Covenant was. Like there wasn't anything real there.
Yeah, no, Alien Covenant was, a lot of it was outside for one thing, and a lot of it was
Yeah.
It's kind of like the let's call it the let's go to New Zealand and film things effect.
Yeah, sure.
they they save money by not having complicated sets, but at the same time they're saving that money in order to spend more money on CG. And
Yeah.
an interesting thing has happened recently that I'm kind of hoping people take note of. And this
Mhm.
might not sound like it relates to writing very much, but this is actually a very important step in the creative process. Is being creative. And the Godzilla movie that came out recently, Godzilla Minus One,
Yeah.
this movie cost about $15 million to make, and it is crushing it at the box office. It is absolutely making bank. I think
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I don't know what the worldwide revenue is. I heard numbers in like close to 100 million at one point, and it's just like, from a $15 million movie, you're making $100 million.
15 1 5?
Yes, one
Really?
five. And the thing about that movie is it has CG and it has green screens, but a large portion of that movie is actual sets, actual set designs.
Yeah.
It's not all filmed in front of a green screen. They built sets for all of this to take place on, and they look gorgeous. And it's just
Sure.
I mean, you don't see that anywhere anymore. And then this movie comes out that, one of the big things people used to say is, well, it costs too much to do set designs. The movie was $15 million,
Yeah.
and it's a gorgeous movie.
I haven't seen it yet. I think I'm going to have to go see it.
I
I mean, it helps. Having real sets helps the actors know what they're interacting with. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that helps a
Like,
lot
mentally.
too. Like one of the saddest things I ever saw was the filming of some
The
of the
meat?
Marvel movies where they're doing all the green screen work. They're just showing them
Yeah.
doing everything in like this sterile environment with like a platform and a big green screen behind them, and it's just like, wow, this is
Well, so it's even worse than that. There's a meme picture of I think Ian McKellen from the not from Lord of the Rings, but from the Hobbit movies, I believe. And he's basically sitting in a green robe on a green chair next to a green table with green cups and green silverware and green plates and a green wall, and like he had to just stop and put his hands into his face and depressurize for a few minutes at one point. And so there's just this picture of him just looking about as sad as a person can look as he sits here in this room of everything being green, facsimiles of everything else.
It is absolutely amazing to me that it is somehow cheaper to create a goblet using computer graphics than it is to just like go to an antique store or like one of them stores that sells like the dragony fairy stuff and just be like, hey, you got a goblet?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we got one right here for $15.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's more to it than that, because you can't just go willy-nilly and go buy random objects and like expect to maintain a coherent visual style. So it's more expensive because you have to have artists and craftsmen actually maintain this coherent visual style. But like, yeah, it's one of those things where when CG started, people were like, "Oh, this is gonna revolutionize everything," but like it's also gonna dehumanize everything. And then there was kind of this period where like everything caught in kind of like a good groove, and then the CG got more and more and more and more and more prominent. And it seems like there's some pushback now. I don't know. I mean, it's just
people became really invested in being able to do like really, really close-up scenes and do slow motion effects. And, the Matrix made famous all the dodging maneuvers that they use in a lot of these movies now where someone will dodge a bullet.
Sure.
There's just a lot of things like that you would want to use CG for became the main focus of especially any movie that had action scenes in it.
Yeah.
There's this strong desire for anyone making a movie to, and I think this all started with the original Star Wars prequels, where they had the huge green screen backgrounds, the big CG wide open spaces.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to have these computer designed stages for the actors to act on, basically. And the problem with that is you get the same people that do that over and over again. They get hired because they're good at it over and over again, and you end up getting like so many movies look exactly the same now. The variety disappears, whereas set designers have to work with physical objects that might not be able to be made in the same way every time. And you're always getting different people to do these things too. It's never going to be the same group, or if it is, they're usually working on the same set of movies where it makes sense that everything looks the same.
Yeah.
The computer thing, it's one of the things about writing is that when you have something that you're good at, you tend to want to do something like that over and over again because, I mean, it's just a feedback. It's like, oh, I make money doing this, I should do it again. And so if you're a really famous CG background designer, you might be able to make a bunch of neat looking different little backgrounds, but there's always going to be a sort of touch of what it is that you do. And that's not even taking into account that once you've been doing something for 20 years, you might get a little lazy at it and be like, well, this is the way I always do it, this is the way I'm going to do it here too.
Sure.
There hasn't been too much in movies in the past 10 years in terms of the scenery that really impressed me. Whereas in the early 2000s, going up to like 2008, there were all sorts of movies that were doing things with CG where it's like, oh, that actually looks beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see that even in things that are really, really great, not just the things that you get bored of after a while. Like the Studio Ghibli movies have a distinct look to them. There's a lot of people that have been drawing a lot of things that are very similar since whenever that studio started, sometime in the 80s, I think. And
that's right.
I think they just released a movie called The Boy and the Heron, and looking at it, you're kind of like, not even taking into account the characters, because Studio Ghibli always kind of rehashed certain character looks to them.
Sure. Well, they have a very distinctive character.
Yeah.
They have a very distinctive way that they draw faces and figures.
But I've missed a few of the Studio Ghibli movies between Spirited Away and The Boy and the Heron, but just looking at the trailer for The Boy and the Heron, it's just like, this looks a lot like Spirited Away. And I'm sure it's a great movie. I mean, Studio Ghibli doesn't really go wrong except for Tales from Earthsea. And but it's definitely one of those things where these are the same people largely that work on these things all the time. You're going to get a lot of the same look. I guess it works okay if you're telling a different fantasy story each time in a Studio Ghibli movie.
Well, I mean, this is one of those things that Ghibli tries to do, and we've seen videos of Miyazaki being angry when they can't do it, right? It is build or draw these very naturalistic and wild scenes or like wild environments, like just to remind, there was that video that you showed me of Miyazaki like saying to a bunch of animators like, okay, it's like when a snake falls out of a tree and the whole group of animators just blankly staring at him, and he's like, oh, we're doomed. Right? Like
he was so angry that they had never seen a snake falling out of a tree.
But like at the same time, that naturalism to what is being drawn gives it kind of a timeless air, right? Like it's not the sharp lines of the 90s. It's not the you know what I mean? Like it looks, it has its own look, but they draw different things with that look, and the things that they're drawing with that look are things out of the real world, or they're things out of fantasy, but they, they're always mixing and matching with like a new fantasy world of some sort, or some group of fantasy creatures, and it's always different, but like you still get the that Ghibli feel to the drawings.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the reasons that people keep going back to, like I can think just off the top of my head, there's, obviously anyone who's watched any anime has seen an anime character run, and a lot of times they're drawn running a lot of the same ways, or they're drawn running in weird ways. And then you go to a Studio Ghibli movie, like in Spirited Away, she's the girl in it is being dragged through these flowers, and she sort of turns around and looks backwards, and she's got one hand up in the air, and she's running, and you're watching this, like, I've seen people run like that before. This was drawn with a more natural running aspect to it. It's attention to detail like that is similar to the idea of what you want to do with set pieces. It's not just in writing that you want to sit back and think about, well, what will make this set, what makes a scene look good or sound good or read well to someone. And having things like in Aliens, when you've got the busted up metal grating with wires hanging down, and that's like in the foreground of the scenery while the characters are standing in front of it. So like one of them is half cut off, you're just seeing the back of them through this part of the stage. A lot of that has been taken away with CG, because when you're working in front of a green screen, you've got a lot less sitting in front of the actors. The actors are usually filmed in all of these movies in, you've got like they're almost their full body, 3 characters at a time, full body shots, nothing impeding your view of them in any way. And this is the majority of scenes that you're seeing filmed. It's a lot of characters standing around. It's almost like watching a stage play, except they're turning you off from using your imagination because they've supplied you with all the scenery with computers.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I mean...
And it's not that CG is bad. It's not that it doesn't have its uses. No. It's not that you need to go back entirely to using set pieces, but like even in stage plays, they would very often wheel in a foreground, Yeah,
that happens.
It's a lot of work to do foregrounds when you're doing green screen. You end up with the Ian McKellen effect, where you've got to move a bunch of green stuff in front of the actors, and they have to pretend to know what the heck it's going to be. And then that's even worse, because apparently in modern filmmaking, half the time the characters are acting, they don't even know what's in the fore or background.
Yeah, it's all gonna happen in post, and they don't know what it is.
Or if they do, it gets changed.
Yeah, or it gets changed.
So I don't know. I think Alien is definitely another one of those masterclass works to be studied by anyone, especially people who like science fiction. Not even for the horror or alien aspect of it, just the way that they created the setting of that movie, and the atmosphere, and the way that the characters had to exist on this remote space, basically a remote space station away from home.
Yeah, right.
It shows a lot of the important features of that. They've got the room where they were sleeping in the freezers. They have a cafeteria where they all group together and eat their meals. They've got the various hallways, some of which look very industrial, and others which have a science fiction, a more brightly lit look to them.
Yeah.
And you get the feeling watching the movie that just because of the couple of scenes they show you at the beginning of the spaceship moving through space, you're very aware that all of the interior of the ship, you're still aware of them being adrift in space the whole time. Like you don't really see any windows or anything where you're looking out and seeing space, but that's where they are. You never get taken out of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's very claustrophobic. There's a lot of like padding on the walls, things like that, because if gravity fails or whatever, they'll need to be able to go along pull themselves along the walls, things like that. Yeah. There's a lot going on.
I mean, I kind of said before we started this one, I didn't know if I was going to be able to bring my A game and talk about the writing and everything, and what tips and tricks and things to look out for. So I don't know if we really hit all the points that I wanted to talking about these movies, but I don't know. I don't think there's any reason for us to go on 10 hours talking about Alien and Aliens. The important thing is...
Yeah, sure. Well, so, it's interesting because in Alien, all the characters have pretty linear like things. There's not really a whole lot of like character growth in Alien, right?
Right.
Kane shows himself early on to be the curious one, and he's the one who ends up getting facehuggered. Ash is calm, doesn't really help out. He turns out that he's trying not to help deliberately. Dallas is brave and respected by everybody, and the loss of him really makes it difficult for the rest of the crew, makes them desperate. In Aliens, on the other hand, there's a lot of characters that have an arc with another character, where like they do something wrong and then they redeem themselves, something like that. So, or even that they start out seeming like a good guy and turn into a bad guy, like Burke does. So I'm just kind of listing these out. Like the relationship between Bishop and Ripley in Aliens is really, really interesting because she doesn't know that he's an android until he does a thing that only an android could do. And then she's very angry and standoffish with him. And then by the end of the movie, he's redeemed himself, right? There's also an interesting point in Aliens where Bishop doesn't know, or this is something that happens in some of the later movies, and isn't really addressed in the first movie. But it's like the idea that aliens don't recognize these humanoid androids as like prey animals, because Bishop doesn't know that the aliens won't attack him, right? He's like, I don't want to. He's like, I don't want to crawl down this tunnel and get this thing going. I don't want to do it, but I have to because I can't let you people get hurt because I decided not to do this action. By the end, Bishop redeems himself after just barely avoiding unredeeming himself, right? Ripley climbs back up out of the bowels of the atmosphere processor, and the the Queen is on her tail, and she told Bishop to stay. And she gets up there, and the ship's not there, or the dropship's not there, and she's like screaming in anger. And then all of a sudden, the dropship reappears. Bishop's like, "Yeah, I had to circle around because things were getting too crazy there, and I couldn't, Hicks is on the dropship with me, and I can't let him die either. It's one of those things where he was getting conflicting orders, but he really did do his best to accomplish them.
Yeah.
There's Gorman, right? Gorman starts out. And he seems competent when he's talking to Ripley with Burke. And then you learn that he's not very competent by the way that he deals with the first mission that they go into.
Oh, he just drops off a cliff immediately. He's just like...
Well, he does, right? But at the same time...
He doesn't know what to do the minute something goes wrong.
He doesn't know what to do. But then he gets knocked out of the movie for a good chunk of the movie. And that is an interesting thing. But then at the very end, he redeems himself with Vasquez, who Vasquez hated him because he basically ordered them in there without having them properly prepared for it. And then he didn't call them out when things went sideways. And, at the end, Gorman goes to try to rescue Vasquez and redeems himself in her eyes. And in everybody else's, too, because he sacrifices himself for, his people rather than just sitting in the comfy chair in safety, right? Yeah. Like, we've got Hudson. Hudson is like the tech guy in the outfit, right? He does the bypass on the door. He's the one that does all the computer stuff, and he's the one that finds the colonists on the computer because he knows how to do the computer stuff. He deals with the electronics. He's one of the people who's got assigned to the motion trackers. And, he has this personality where he's very jokey, but then when things start to turn over, he gets very freaked out. And then by the end, he's kind of gotten his stride again, thanks to, Ripley encouraging him, stuff like that. Yeah, we have, there's a lot more character arcs in Aliens. Gorman and Vasquez. Burke going from being, seemingly a friendly, harmless guy to, pure freaking evil is another arc, right? There's just a lot going on character-wise in Aliens that doesn't really happen that much in the first one. So and of course, you do that because you're doing a more heroic movie instead of a slasher film. Like the point of a slasher film is that almost everybody dies, but the point of a military sci-fi action thing is that there's a lot of losses on the way, but at the same time there's kind of at least somewhat uplifting of an ending. They trashed that for Alien 3, but whatever.
Yeah.
The ending of Aliens is quite positive.
Yeah, I haven't actually gone back and watched Alien 3 since I saw Alien Covenant. I feel like it's almost going to be refreshing by comparison.
It's not a terrible movie. It's just that it has such a dismal tone and such a lack of like meaningful characters in it that it just doesn't do anything.
I remember watching it, and I just, because I watched it way after it came out. I didn't watch it back when it originally came out in theaters. It was, it was relatively recently. It might have been like 10 years ago, but I remember watching it and just like, oh, it's like the Alien movies going through their grunge phase.
Yeah, there's definitely an aspect of that. Everything's very dirty.
Yeah, there wasn't much
the set design is very sparse. Is another thing in Alien 3 that set design is not there.
Yeah, they probably couldn't get the budget for a third movie.
Yeah, I don't know how that worked out, because the second one was so popular, I would have expected them to have a huge budget for the third one, but...
Well, I don't even remember when the third one came out. I feel like it came out way after the second one.
It was only a few years.
Oh, well. But it definitely... Because that was that was the 90s, right? I'm pretty sure it was the 90s.
Yes.
And it definitely had that...
So Alien was 1979. Aliens was 86. Alien 3 was 92.
Alien 3 was 92.
So it's about the same it's about the same distance between them, about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, so we were well into the beginnings of the alternative rock era.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know how much of an ass. I don't know how much of a like it makes me think of.
But that's what it is. That's what the grunge phase really is here. It's a large, like, very like down and dirty look to everything that was coming out at the time, and Aliens did not need that to be a part of anything that they were involved in. It didn't even take place in space, as far as I remember. Wasn't it a prison colony on a planet?
Yes, it was a planet. Yes.
So it lost a lot of what made both those movies interesting, and then it ended like it ended in the dumbest fashion. Like, why would you end this way? So it felt like a series closer too. It felt like it should have stopped after that. But then they needed to make more, so then they had to have Ripley back. So then, come up with a stupid reason to bring a character back. I don't know. There's a lot of movies that I definitely don't think it was a very good movie.
No, it wasn't great. I think people remember it worse than it was a little bit, but not by much.
Yeah, well, kind of like The Lost World.
Yeah,
in Jurassic Park. Like Jurassic Park was a masterpiece. Lost World was not all that great, but if you compare it to any of the recent Jurassic Park movies, it's actually a solid film.
Yeah, decent.
Even for all the stupid things that happened in it, it's just like, yeah, but it's not as stupid as this, and at least it's like... the worst thing about The Lost World is that I read the book before I went to see the movie, and Jurassic Park somewhat followed the original Jurassic Park book, but even so, they were both phenomenal. So the book stands by itself, the movie stands by itself. The Lost World, the book, was also a very good book.
Right.
The movie, they should have tried to stick to the book a little bit, just a little bit. There was nothing in that movie that was even closely related to the book. That it was just people collecting paychecks.
Yeah, pretty much.
But that said, it was not nearly as bad as The Lost World or, God forbid, what was it, The Fallen Kingdom?
Yeah. Jurassic World 2, Fallen Kingdom.
Oh my God.
The most unintentionally correctly titled movie of all time. So one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more was the cutscenes in Aliens, because I'm very familiar with these.
All right.
And we talked a little bit about the daughter scene, right? That's early in the movie. Burke comes in. He's like, "Here's a picture of your daughter. She died when she was 57, or she died when she was 65, or something like that, which was 2 years previous to us finding you." And that's something that I think really probably should have made it into a theatrical version, because it does help motivate Ripley and Newt, right? But then I was looking at this, and there's another series of cutscenes later in the movie. The turrets are completely cut from the theatrical version.
Oh. I thought that was a really good scene.
Well, so I thought about it a little bit, and it is a really good scene in the sense that it looks cool and it sounds cool, and, there's some fun stuff going there. But then I thought about it a little bit more carefully, and I realized those scenes have no effect on the plot whatsoever.
No, they don't, but I think the reason that they're a good scene isn't just because they look cool or anything like that. I think I think it really added to the idea that, they came in a way that, they thought they were over prepared for the situation.
Right.
And they quickly find out that they have automatic turrets firing off hundreds of rounds, and you were assuming that every time it's firing, it's killing some of these aliens. And by the time they run out of bullets for these things, they realize just how bad a situation they're in, and they are woefully underprepared for what they have to deal with.
That they kind of know. So I'm going to push back a little bit there, because they already know that they're in a bad situation, because those 4 turrets are the best equipment that they have, and they know it before they even set them up. They're like, yeah, we have 5 rifles, 2 flamethrowers, one of which is broken, some grenades, and these 4 turrets. So the turrets are like a big deal. They're like, this is the best stuff we have. But the thing is that it doesn't, and for the purpose of a movie, you're always trying to cut time, right? So here's the way the movie works in the director's cut. The aliens have a wave. The aliens get shot by the turrets. The aliens retreat. The aliens have a wave. The aliens get shot by the turrets. The aliens retreat. The aliens have a wave. They get through a different way, and they attack the Marines. That's how it happens in the director's cut. In the theatrical cut, the aliens just wait longer until they have a wave, and they attack the Marines. And it's the same scenes. It's not like there's like fewer aliens in the director's cut for them to fight. So realistically, even though those turrets are cool, and even though those turrets do have like kind of a purpose, as far as like explaining how bad the situation they're in is, they already are in a pretty bad situation, considering that the whole installation is about to explode, and the turrets don't have any effect on the plot. So it's an interesting cut, because it's a cool scene, and it does show some things. But at the same time, from a movie-making perspective, or even from a storytelling perspective, it does not advance the plot.
Well, not everything in a story necessarily has to advance the plot. I mean, if you take out...
No, I agree with that, but
I think that... Okay, so this is after they've already suffered a defeat, too. So,
yes.
So now they've seen the enemy, they've seen that it's kind of this horde, and they retrench, and they have this weaponry that they're hoping to protect themselves with. And just getting to see them... I mean, I agree that it makes sense why that was one of the scenes that got cut. But at the same token, getting to see the characters watching the countdown of the bullets and just wondering, like, is this going to end? Like, just how much is out there?
Right. Well,
theoretically,
so there's a couple of points.
Theoretically, they should know exactly.
They know how many aliens there are, because there's I think it's cut. But in the director's cut, there's a scene that says, Hadley's Hope population 159 or something like that. So we know that they're limited to 158 aliens, since Newt counts. But I mean, it's a very tense scene. But sometimes if you are trying to cut so I guess this is something I'm thinking of for like word count. If you're writing a story that has a limited word count because you're trying to publish it with a particular thing, like, this is something to think about, is that what scenes actually advance the plot, and what scenes are cool but don't actually do anything. And it's an I just think it's interesting that they chose to cut out a very interesting looking and an interesting sounding scene that just didn't advance the plot. And you might have to make those kind of hard decisions when writing to a word limit as well. So kind of thought there was something to that, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you're completely right there. And actually, it's when I was watching the director's cut, I've got a Blu-ray copy of the collection, and in both the director's cuts, like in the first one, Ridley Scott shows up and he talks for like 3 or 4 minutes about things that about making the movie and the things they added in or left out of the director's cut.
Yeah.
Then James Cameron shows up if you pop in the second disc for the director's cut. It's like 30 seconds of him just saying, yeah, there was a lot we wanted to put in, but the thinking at the time was movies have to be a certain length, and so we weren't able to put all this in, but here's the full ride that we wanted to give you. And then it just like he's just like, enjoy the movie. It's just like 30 seconds of him talking as opposed to Ridley Scott going into like 4 minutes of an introduction. I thought it was kind of funny.
Excruciating detail, yeah.
Well, not excruciating, but like he
No,
it was almost
I
like it was almost like James Cameron is like, why are you talking? What am I doing here?
Why am I here? I don't
but that's I can completely see where especially at the time, because he is right. Like they always tried to keep movies to around the 90-minute mark in that
right.
time period for various reasons, television play reasons, and there were usually more movies coming out in theaters at the time, so they tried to keep shorter runtimes so that theaters wouldn't discount them just because it's like, well, this movie is like 4 hours long. We've got 5 other movies people want to see. We'll only be able to play these. Yeah,
this was in the days when like a big movie theater might have 6 screens.
Yeah, but they had 20 movies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's
So let's see. Another cutscene is the scene in the dropship where Hudson gives his monologue about Ripley, me and my team of ultimate badasses will protect you. That's cut from the theatrical version.
I am glad that one was cut from the theatrical version. I actually hated that scene.
I don't hate that scene, but the thing is that everything else, it's a very good example of tell don't show, that scene, because you kind of know. You've seen them loading missiles into the thing. You've seen all the different weapons that they have. You've seen, that they have this giant expensive ship with, they have a tank, they have all this good stuff, and it's like having him monologue about it is a definite case of tell don't show. And so that one being cut, I totally understand, but it still is a fun couple of lines.
It was funny,
especially when he ends with, yeah, it's funny, and it gave Paxton a little bit more chance to emote early on before he becomes the freaked out guy who's very, very scared.
Game over, man.
It gives him a little bit more of an arc too, because he's confident and then he's very not confident.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, that scene kind of establishes that he looks confident, but it's like it's a lot of it is just talk. A lot of it is just him like riling himself up, only to change later. But the reason I hated that scene so much was pretty much almost exactly what you said, where it was more tell than show. But
absolutely,
I think it was more that I'm listening to him talk, and it's like this is exposition, and this isn't how a human being talks in any circumstance. Well, there was way too much of him prattling on about the gear. You're right, and it's just like he wouldn't even be thinking that Ripley would know what he was talking about in most cases. It would have been a better scene if he hadn't gone into detail about what gear they were carrying. If he had just run off with some jokes and kind of riled up Ripley a bit.
Maybe, but he is the tech guy, so like he's like, oh, we got phased pulse something or other, and he makes a sound out of it. He goes like whap or something like that. It's a very Hudson moment. So I don't know.
There were a lot of characters like that I remember. I think there were characters like that in Highlander 2, and I never saw the appeal of putting that in the movies. Just
fair enough.
I don't know. Maybe it's just a personal preference thing, but there's definitely a lot more tell than show there. And that's not always a bad thing, but the way it was executed was, I thought, kind of poor.
A friend of mine is like a huge fan of the first Highlander movie, and he says the second movie does not exist.
Well, the second movie says that the second movie doesn't exist because they released a director's cut from that which changed one line that I am aware of that completely changed the context of all of it, and it's just like, I don't understand how this fits in with anything else in the Highlander universe.
See, I haven't seen the second movie, and I've only seen the first movie once, so I guess I can't really speak to that one.
I think it was just like an offhand line about how they were all space aliens or something.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, God.
And so it's just like, then why is it called the Highlander?
Yeah.
We're from the planet Highland SP-801.
Right.
No, it was like I watched Highlander 2 thinking thinking that I was going to get a follow-up to the first movie, and instead I got something that was, it was almost a repeat of the first movie, but like, let's retell it poorly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't make sense either, because like, what was the difference between them having the game on one planet as opposed to
I know.
like why wouldn't you
mean,
also have to kill the ones that are on the other planet? Is there some distance factor to the quickening that we're not aware of?
I don't know. I am sure I don't know. So one interesting aspect that I think is worth mentioning in Aliens is the ticking clock. So everything's kind of like dismal but like workable, right? They're like, okay, we don't have many weapons, but we have these turrets. We have, we can barricade ourselves in, and all we have to do is wait, for 17 days for the for them to realize that we're overdue, right? And then you have Bishop, and he's like, I have bad news, and then he shows them the giant flame coming out of the atmosphere processor. He's like, we have 4 hours. I don't know. There's a lot of effort put into these like ticking clock events in movies these days, and like this is a pretty good one because it actually stems from actions that the characters took earlier on. Right? They were told not to shoot inside that area because of the heat exchangers. They did shoot. Now they have this other problem on their hands. It's kind of one of these things where, yes, you saved your life for the moment, but unfortunately, the long-term effects are going to be pretty significant.
I don't know. Maybe someone should have been wearing a Gorman was right shirt at some point.
Well, that wasn't Gorman. That was Ripley.
Well, he was the one that gave the order, though, and
well, no, but he wouldn't have given the order if Ripley hadn't made him aware of it.
No, the point
right?
is the point is that all of those characters, as far as they know, are just getting an order from this guy, and 2 of them immediately disobeyed the order. And then going back, it's just like, oh wait, he was right. We shouldn't have done this. But then again, they probably would have died if they hadn't. So
yeah,
I guess I guess it's all even in the end. Nonetheless, that's a very James Cameron thing, I think. Like, yeah. I don't know how to relate that exactly to Terminator 2, but there's a bit of a ticking clock element in Terminator 2 in the sense that it's time travel, and so if they don't resolve the issues in a way in which all takes place within a certain amount of time, then...
Well, the ticking clock in Terminator 2 is 3 years away. Because the movie takes place in 1994, and the Skynet attack happens in 1997, according to the official lore in the movie, I believe.
Yeah, and in reality, that's when it happened in reality, too.
Well, 1997 was the end days in Crystallis, the SNK top-down Zelda clone for NES.
And they all got it right.
1997. They all got it right.
That's why we skipped that year.
We skipped 1997?
Yeah, didn't you know?
I did not.
We totally just glossed over that one. We were like, nope, we still got stuff to do. We're just going to go right to 1998. We will get back to 97 when the world is ready to end.
Yes.
And it's a lot more like Crystallis. But yeah, there's some... That seemed to be what James Cameron did back then. Because a movie would come out that was kind of like a really good thriller, sci-fi-ish movie, and he would do a sequel and turn it into an action movie. He did that with Terminator. The original Terminator movie was this movie where 2 people were being hunted by a monster that seemed like it was unstoppable. And the second movie, there's another monster that's unstoppable, but in order to make it an action movie, they supply the good guys with another monster who is pretty unstoppable himself.
Who is similarly unstoppable, yeah.
Only slightly less unstoppable than the thing that they're fighting.
Well, there was definitely a lot more gunplay in the second Terminator movie as compared to the first one.
Yeah, and it was more action than thinking.
Yeah, a lot of action, not so much. Less thinking. There was still a strong chase element in both movies, so I don't know.
The chase element seemed a lot more dire in the first movie, just because you had people that had no way to prepare for this, whereas in the second movie, they had the help. The only thing that made it really feel dangerous was the fact that you had one of the robots that could disguise itself as almost anything.
Well, there's also the fact that in 2 they actually get away, and then they decide that they have to go back in order to deal with Cyberdyne Laboratories or systems or industries or whatever it's called. So they put themselves back in danger, which puts them back in the chase. But yeah, I don't have. I mean, as I was watching these, I kind of wrote down step by step every writing element that I kind of saw going on. But most of it, I think we've pretty much covered.
Yeah, there's. We looked at a couple of scenes. The scene at the end of Alien is just by itself, just that couple of minutes is a good scene for someone to sit down and watch and just observe all the elements that make it suspenseful. Because it's kind of like a self-contained, like, imagine
Ripley in the Shuttle. You mean?
Yeah,
right?
Ripley in the Shuttle is almost a self-contained horror movie.
Yeah.
So it's like. It's got a lot of the elements of what you want to do if you want to give readers a thrill or build some suspense. It has Ripley realizing there's a danger. It has her hiding from the danger. It has her coming up with a solution and then having to trek back out and face the danger. And then it ultimately has a suspenseful resolution where for a moment you're not sure that she's going to succeed. The alien is caught on the door and it's hanging on the ship. And then she can see it trying to crawl back into the ship before she finally fries it with the thrusters.
Yeah.
And it's just a couple of minutes, and it's a good scene to watch. Pay attention to the expressions and everything that Ripley's doing during that scene.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the way the alien is acting. Because the alien is terrifying sitting there asleep. And that's an important thing about...
Well, sitting there asleep, you don't even realize it's there because its head... is blends in with the equipment.
But once you do, it's clearly visible. She looks out. She looks out and sees it still sitting there sleeping, and it's the most terrifying thing in the world.
Well, no, it's awake at that point. She's walking right up to it, and then it wakes up and shoots a hand out at her. That's what spooks her, and that's what tells her that it's there. She was like several inches away from it, not even realizing it was there until the hands shot out.
Then she goes into the room and she observes it through the porthole. And
she knows it's there
still
now.
Lying there. It's like it's sleeping and hasn't woken up yet.
Well, no, it's stuck. It wedged itself in, and it can't get out easily.
It didn't look like that to me. It kind of looked like it was sleeping. I always saw that scene as the alien was sleeping because it made a couple of motions like it was kind of groggy and turning its head and almost like it sneezed at one point. And the hand shooting out seemed to be just a reaction of it, brushing up against something while it was sleeping, because the hand didn't grasp at her in any way. It didn't try.
It went straight for her. It couldn't reach her. What happened was that it climbed in. The way I've always interpreted that scene is that the alien climbed in and basically tried to hide. It basically found a tight space that it could get into and sit, and it kind of wedged itself in. And then Ripley was fiddling around near it, and it was like half asleep, but it reached a hand out. It couldn't reach Ripley, because if it could, it would have reached her, right? But the hand shot out. She sees the hand, and she freaks out. She goes back. She gets the suit on. It's wedged in there. It's not really sure whether it needs to get out, right? Ripley went away. Then what she does is she starts spraying it with gases after she gets out. She gets out in the suit. She's sitting in the chair. She's buckled in, and she's using the buttons on her chair arm to spray it with, like, cold or hot gases or something, and it freaks out, and then it unwedges itself and tries to go after her. Then that's the way I've always interpreted that scene.
I think you should rewatch it and try to look at it from the sense of the thing crawled in there and fell asleep, and tell me what you think one day. Like tell me. I think because it just I'm picturing it in my head, and I just can't see it as it was trying to squirm its way out in any way. Like I can't really see that it was stuck. It really
because she's spraying with the gas, and it takes it several seconds to get itself out, even though it's being sprayed with the gas and screaming.
It's getting sprayed with gas and waking up and not exactly sure what's going on, and so then after that it clearly gets out.
But that all happens after the hand darts out, and the hand darts out in a clearly aggressive way.
But it doesn't grab at her, and that's the thing. It seems like she it seemed like it was a scene where she had partially awoken it, but it was still asleep, because it kind of like turns its head after that when she runs off into the other room, like it's falling back
Yeah.
asleep, and she's watching it for a moment, and it's just sort of sitting there. It doesn't seem like it's really trying to get out of anything in any way.
Well, it's not trying to get out of there because she went away. The stimulus is gone.
I don't know. I feel like it would have tried to attack her more, but I don't know. That's an interesting interpretation though, because I never would have thought of it as being stuck there. That was just immediate for me. It was just like, oh, it was asleep, and she almost woke it up. And...
Well, there's not time for it to fall asleep because it's been 4 minutes since it killed 2 people, kind of thing.
No, not at all.
It's
probably crawled in there because it was the only quiet place in the entire ship. Everything else is this red alert and lights flashing and noises, and it probably scurried off to go to the one quiet place it could find, wedged itself in, and took a nap. It was like, screw this. I'm resting for a bit. It was hibernating.
I don't know. It's been only. I mean, the whole destruct sequence takes 10 minutes, right? She starts the destruct sequence, and it says you now have 10 minutes. She tries to turn it off at 5 minutes, and fails. In those first 5 minutes, the 10 minutes down to 5 minutes, the alien attacks and kills Lambert and Parker, and then
sure, but
and then it heads her off, right? She's going towards the shuttle, and it blocks her. So she runs away and she tries to turn the destruct sequence off. That doesn't work. So the alien just saw her. It's between her and the shuttle. She, the 5-minute mark passes. She can't turn off the destruct sequence. She goes back to the shuttle. She gets into the shuttle and gets it far enough away from the ship in those 5 minutes that the blast doesn't kill her. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it had time to fall asleep.
Well, remember, she takes off.
I think it was trying to hide.
She takes off and she's on the ship for a while. She's flying away before she stands up and starts looking around at things before she eventually finds the alien sitting there. It's just one brief hand movement that doesn't really, and it kind of pops up. It doesn't reach out towards her. It's just the hand sort of moving up and then retracting.
It moves fast though, and there's a sound too, it noticed something that it's trying to grab but it can't reach. It's not like the hand dangles off of out of a ceiling tile or something like that. It reaches out, it just can't get to her.
I don't know. I think I'm firmly on Team Alien sleeping on this one.
I mean, it might have been trying to sleep, but she woke it up and the hand darted out, and after that, it's awake. It's not going back to sleep.
Well, no, it's like a reaction, it's sleeping, and it it had a reaction in its sleep because something brushed up against it.
She didn't. Well, I don't know.
She was moving stuff around near it.
Yeah, but it tried to reach for her, and it did so quickly.
The alien seems like a creature that would not just give up the minute she leaves.
Well, no, that's my point, is that it doesn't give up. It's trying to extract itself from the place that it's stuck.
But we never see it struggle until it's being hit by the gas, at which point it's not sure where it is anyway. So I think there's more evidence for it to be sleeping. I think this is my favorite part of this, by the way. It's just us arguing about whether or not the alien was sleeping. I don't know. I wonder if this was I wonder if this ever came up anywhere before.
I have no idea.
I gotta find the original script and see if it says if it was stuck or sleeping. It looked for all the world like it was sleeping to me. That's my point. But try going back and watching it though, and having the idea of it sleeping in your head instead of it being stuck.
Oh, no, I mean I definitely feel like it was dormant, it was going dormant. I just don't think it had time to fall asleep. I think it was more like it wedged itself in there to try to hide, so that it would be less likely to be seen, and the idea was that it was gonna come out later basically. But I think it wedged itself in. It's a very tight space for that large alien, and we see the alien go through a bunch of narrow spaces, but at the same time it seems like it wedged itself in there, and I don't know that. I mean, there's definitely an element of it being semi comatose or something like that, but once the hand darts out, my assumption is that it's awake, because the hand darting out is not like a sleepy person rubbing at their eyes. It's a dart out, not a random kind of leisurely grab. And then I think that the couple of minutes that she takes putting the suit on is not enough for it to extract itself from the place that it wedged itself in. Plus, like, she's gone, so it can't, like, smell her anymore. And so, like, maybe it's like, well, did it go away? Should I wedge myself back in? I always saw that head movement that Ripley's watching as she puts on the suit as it kind of, like, looking around to see if prey is still available and kind of deciding that maybe it's not.
I mean, it could be the case that maybe it's like the aliens in the second movie where they kind of just curled themselves up into the walls and they didn't really see any reason to attack anyone right away.
Well, what triggered them was the sound of the newly born alien dying, right? They flame it, it screams, and as soon as it screams, you start to see the aliens move. So they they go dormant, but as soon as a threat is observed, they move into action, basically.
But I mean, that's still basically the same as sleeping. I just don't see any. I don't really see any evidence of it being stuck in that particular scene.
Well, the amount of time it took for it to get out after she starts spraying with gas.
I mean, so imagine you crawled in somewhere and you're just sort of chilling, and you start getting sprayed in all directions with some kind of gas. You don't have. It's not
all directions. It's one direction. There's one little gas.
All right,
jet.
so you're basically being assaulted by something and you don't know what, and an animalistic instinct to fend it off. It's probably just these are probably just defensive maneuvers on its part. Flailing at this thing that's blasting it in the face, and then it crawls out. Even that doesn't really imply that it was stuck. It just implies that it was flailing about because something was attacking it.
Well, if something attacks me, if something surprises me when I'm laying down in bed, I can get up pretty quickly.
Yeah, but if you're surrounded by things on all sides, it takes you a second to get out.
That's my point. I'm stuck.
But it wasn't that it was stuck and couldn't get out. It was that upon being attacked, it flailing about, it has limited movement range before it can crawl out. It's not really stuck. There's no reason to think that if it really wanted to reach out and grab her, that it wouldn't have been able to. This is probably the dumbest thing we have in this whole 2-hour talk.
Yeah, we can cut it here.
No, no, it's fine though. It's this is the fun stuff. I
guess so.
I'm trying to come up with a reason that I could think that it was actually stuck that sticks.
I think it's obvious that it was stuck. Because it couldn't reach its arm out all the way to grab her. It took it approximately 2 minutes to get out of the place that it was wedged in when it started getting sprayed with the stuff in the face. And it didn't get out immediately when the hand came out too. It didn't I think it was trying to figure out whether it needs to get out and trying to figure out how to get back out in a reasonable fashion. And the gas jets were a motivation, but it took too long. If it wasn't wedged in somewhat, it would have gotten out much faster.
Well, the whole point of Ridley blasting that gas at it,
Ripley,
seemed to be to get it out so that she could blast it out of the airlock. So
yeah, that's right.
I don't know. No matter how I look at it, I just can't see it as it got stuck in there. I can only see it as it was asleep. And
I think it stuck itself in there. I think it wedged itself in.
Even the hand thing, to me that looked more like so when a horse is swatting flies off of its backside with its own tail. That's kind of the reaction that I'm picturing. That was
no. It
felt emotion.
Watch it again. The hand comes out. The hand comes out. There's a sound. There's a musical sting. It's definitely trying to grab at her, but can't because it's wedged in there. It's wedged itself in there. It's a I was just out of reach of the killer moment.
I'm gonna have to give it a watch again now. I think our point though was that this is a good setup. This is a good couple of minutes to observe, to write something suspenseful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that we can talk about one aspect of it for that long is a pretty significant.
Usually you've got something where it's like you either tend to convince me or you kind of make me question it, but I'm not seeing it this time. I'm going to go back and watch it again. I'm really not seeing it. It was asleep as far as I can tell.
I mean, watch the moment that you need to watch is the hand darting out. It's quick. It happens in a couple of frames. There's a musical sting and there's a sound at the same time. And that's what clinches it for me, is that the alien was reaching for her. She was just out of reach. Once it reaches for her, it knows that she's there, but it doesn't know whether she's a threat. Then she goes away. And it's like, well, do I need to get out of here? Should I stay here? I'm not sure. It stays there. She starts spraying with the gas, and it's like, okay, I'm being sprayed with gas now. Now I need to get out of here. And it takes it, 20, 30 seconds to make its way out of the place that it wedged itself in.
I don't really see any difference between what you described and what could have just been a reaction of it being woken up slightly. Because it does, it looks around for a second and then it just like tuckers back in.
No, it's looking around the whole time.
Its head does not react until after she's run away. Like she's...
Well, we don't see it because we don't have that camera angle. We see the hand darting out is consciousness. It is conscious at that point.
That is not necessarily the case. That could totally just be a reaction, like a dog kicking its leg in a dream.
No, because of the musical and sound stings that happen at the same time as the grab.
Well, you do a musical sting when something happens that's supposed to surprise the character that sees it. She had a shock. It gets a musical sting, and
no, but the alien makes a sound too. Like there's several things going on at that point that suggest that the alien knows that prey is nearby. It is being hostile toward that prey, and then the prey runs away, and it's wedged in there. It doesn't get out because it's like, well, is she gone? Should I just stay here?
This is driving me.
But then she starts spraying with gas.
This is driving me absolutely nuts. Okay, do you remember the Robin Hood animated movie from Disney? Do you remember the scene where Robin Hood is lifting the keys off of the Sheriff of Nottingham? And he's slowly like guiding the keys up, and they kind of brush across the sheriff's chest, and he reaches up and sort of like rubs his face and mutters and stays. That's what I'm thinking is going on with this alien in this scene.
No, I don't think that's right.
I don't think there's any way we can resolve it either unless we look at the script. I might have to look at the script. Now I really want to know. Like, I want to know how wrong one of us has to be here, but...
I mean, the reach is not a sleeping reach. The reach is an awake reach.
We don't know how an insect would react like that, or whatever that creature is. We don't know that. I mean...
The reach, okay, so like... I am maintaining that the reach is not a sleeping reach.
Every dog I've ever had, if it is sleeping and you pet it briefly... Almost every time it'll like kick a leg or something, and then 5 seconds will go by, and then it'll kind of like look up and look around at you to see, oh, someone's petting me. That was the exact feeling that I got watching what happened with the alien. It like kicked out an arm, and she runs off and hides, and and then the next scene you get is this alien with its head up looking around, seeing what the heck was that, and then it just sort of goes back to what it was doing.
I don't see that it goes back to what it was doing. I see it trying to figure out prey is not here anymore. I can't smell it, so I'm gonna stay tucked in here where I wedged myself.
All right, well, I think we're at an impasse, and this has been great because I think we've done this for 15 minutes straight now.
Something like that.
This should get we should just clip this out and give it its own little thing.
I could do that. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So this is our discussion of Alien and Aliens, I guess.
Yeah, and...
Anything to add in particular that you want to also talk
about?
I
think I made the mistake of wanting to talk more about the scenes and the characters and some of the differences that happened than actually talking about any writing technique, but that's okay. I mean, it's important to understand how scenes come together for these things. It's important you do... it's important to look at things in a logical sense, as we've said before, where he doesn't just crawl into this vent because it sounds fun. He does it because they have a plan and they're going to route this alien to get it off of the ship. If you want a masterclass in how not to write a movie, besides Tales from Earthsea, actually a much better one would be Alien Covenant, which is not actually a movie. So if you watch that and don't do anything that it did, then you will have successfully not written a non-movie.
There you go. And no, we are not going to do an episode where we rewatch Alien Covenant and talk about it in detail.
That is off the table.
That is off the table.
That movie was atrocious.
It is not going to happen. That non-movie was atrocious.
That creature from outer space was atrocious.
That object. That abomination.
If Alien Covenant was an organism discovered on a planet from outer space, Mother's Orders would have come back to vent the sucker.
Mother's Orders would have been self-destruct now.
Yeah.
Don't even bother.
Do not let this escape.
Basically. All right. I guess we'll call it here. This has been episode 13 of the Wordy Pair podcast. We are slowly devolving into a thing where we talk about movie scenes. Hopefully we can pull back into the writing aspect soon.
Oh, this one was just random. I was like, hey, want to talk about the differences between Alien and Aliens? Which we did in the first 5 seconds by saying one is an action movie and one is not. And then we went off the rails.
Well, I mean, we went into more detail. You know, of course we could do like a scene-by-scene discussion, but that would take dozens of hours, and that's not going to be fun for anybody.
We went over those opening scenes. That was, I mean, that...
I think we've covered a decent number of scenes to kind of make our points, and I've tried to bring writing back into it a few times, so I think we did a pretty decent coverage.
I stood in your way on that almost every time.
If anyone wants to ask questions, throw the questions at the YouTube.
If anyone wants to know why Rudy's wrong about the alien being stuck, just email me at.
And if everyone wants to know why Justin is wrong about the alien going back to sleep after grabbing at someone immediately, then you can just send me an email. I mean, why he's clearly wrong. Clearly wrong.
In our next episode... Our next episode, blood feud between Justin and Rudy.
Next episode, the wordy single person.
2 go in, 1 come out.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And we are out. Have a good week.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.